Greetings boys and gits, and welcome again to Dread Wargaming. In today's episode, the second of the ORK-SENTIALS series, I'm going to be looking at Ork loot. Now loot is an Orky term for weapons, tools, vehicles or equipment that they've either stolen or salvaged that may have belonged to another clan or another faction or army altogether. But they've taken it away, they've nicked it, and they're going to bolt it together, smash it together, give it to a mech to fix up and make into something unique and orky. So it's a very orky tradition to loot things, and it's a very built-in naturalistic thing for an orc to want to do. Looting is a particularly orky pastime, and most orcs partake in it to some extent, but none more so arguably than those of the Death Skulls clan or those belonging to a freebooters crew. The orcs' love for looting can be found represented with the looters and the looted wagon. Now the looted wagon is not actually in the new codex, so at the moment we don't have it, but it is expected to be dropped in this month's coming chapter approved. It should have been in the codex of course, but that's a subject for another video. The looters, however, are in the codex, and they wield heavy weapons cobbled together from looted dakka. Very exciting. Now Games Workshop actually make some looters, and they're quite characterful models in fact. The guns that they carry, you can actually make out that they are supposed to represent Imperial weapons that have been cobbled together and sliced and diced and crammed together and pumped full of orky energy and inspirations and just basically strapped together and harnessed onto a rig and given to a looter to fire. I think they're pretty awesome. You can further expand on this idea by adding your own kit bash variations to the death guns that Games Workshop make. So you can take the looter's death gun and you can add your own looted weapons to it, as I'm about to show you. Here I have a few I've started kit bashing myself. Now with the first boy, I wanted to achieve a more dynamic pose than the standard static pose that your ordinary looter would have. So I've dropped the gun a little and I've picked a head that is sort of looking up as if he's maybe choosing a target. So that's the first one. The second lad, this chap here, he's got a third party head and a third party body, which needs a little green stuffing around the belly there because that connection's not so great yet. And I've also modded the gun just slightly there. So that's a looted gun that's slightly modded. The third boy here also has his gun modded. He has a las cannon barrel added there, and he's got a little towel blaster on the side as well. I don't know quite what that is, but it's a towel blaster of some description. He's also got a third party head, and for this guy I've used the body of the runt herder. So he's a little bit podgy. I think that's quite cool, you know, he's maybe got a bit used to just lugging this thing around and being a bit boss, so he's got a little bit of extra weight on him. I'm happy about that. The fourth chap has a twin-linked death gun that has a looted Tau railgun welded to an orky big shooter, you see? Now, it does need a little bit of green stuff work along here. See this horrible mould line there? That needs sorting out a little bit. And he's got a third-party head, like a freebooter head, so he ties the rest of my looters in with the freebooter theme of my army. The fifth looter, who's taken looting from the tower to an exciting extreme and nicked himself some kind of tennis ball launcher, or I'm not sure what that is, but I'm going to paint them yellow in there because I think it looks like a tennis ball launcher. But I've also given this guy a crazy head, and seeing as I nick or loot most of my Tau stuff from my opponent or friend named Jack, I'll call him my friend, but for the purposes of gaming, he's my opponent. So I'm going to call this guy Mad Jack because he's got a big Tau gun and a big mad face. So yeah, meet Mad Jack. Looter number 6 was designed to demonstrate to the viewer that a looter's hands are not glued to their rigs. I think throwing this one boy in with the others should lend this impression to the entire mob, and as such will make them
look like their grip on their own rigs is all the more a choice than just a product of lack of choice for me as the modeler. So what I've done is I've plastic rodded this little handle on the side there, and I've given him this pointing arm, and I picked out a head and turned it to the side, so it looks like he's taunting an enemy or laughing at a target that he just blew up with his gun. The 7th lad has a straight up looted plasma weapon, heavy plasma. Now I do still need to connect the wires to the backpack, and I do still need to deal with the little Space Marine hand in there somewhere. But, and that's why I've highlighted it green to sort of remember to deal with it. I think it's pretty cool. I need to rebase it and stuff. It was a model I started making yonks ago, and I didn't really do too much with it since. He's also got himself a looted Space Marine shoulder pad, probably ripped it off of the victim that he took this weapon from, perhaps. There we go. That's another more traditional looter. And finally, speaking of traditional looters, this lad I made, I think, in 3rd edition. He's actually from a Imperial mortar team. So he's loading in his mortar in the top. He's not quite sure how to operate it brilliantly, but he'll figure it out. That's what orcs do. I never really started painting this guy, really. And I chucked him in a box, and I found him, so he's going to go in my looter squad.
Looters are not the only orc models, though, that you can represent this fluffy orc cultural thing of looting with. You don't have to confine it to just your looters, so if you want to express this love for looting on your other models, go right ahead. It really will look well on some of your characters and your specialists particularly. So what I would suggest, if you're going to go down that road, is to create yourself a looted bits box. If you haven't already seen episode 1, bits box, then you should be ashamed of yourself. And you should go and check it out after this video. In that, I discuss a few different types of bits box that are available on the market, and I'll show you how I use them to create a more organised bits box. But just now, I'm going to show you what I'd call a looted bits box.
In that video, I showed off this cheap bits box. It houses my looters, so I do have, if I can open it, some looted weapons parts in the front here from Space Marines and from Imperial, and a few other bits and bobs in there as well. Now, you could easily use a box like this for all of your looted bits and bobs, and like I said before, they're about £1 or €1.50, so that's a good option. But you could also dedicate a drawer of one of the larger types I discussed with loot, like I've done here. In this case, this is my towel loot drawer. So this is a bunch of stuff that I got from my opponent Jack, that he's kindly given me, that I can use for anything that is going to have a bit of towel stuff on it. You know, like I can add these details onto the sides of engines and wagons and all sorts of things. They're just going to look like I've had a mad mech building crazy stuff out of towel loot. It's all exciting, guys. I love all this stuff. Another option is to use a traditional mixed bits box, like this one here. Now this is where I keep all those bits that I don't really care about, to be honest with you. So I'm able to just go into this and use it without a thought for any conversion, because these are all bits that don't belong to a kit that I'm putting together anymore. These are leftover bits and bobs, and they belong to all different factions, and there's bits and bobs in here that are non-GW. There's even, look, I mean, there's a lid from a drink bottle. There's all sorts of things in there, you know. And because it's stuff that you don't have to think about using, you're more likely to dive in there and actually use it. So this box gets a right hammering, I'll tell you. That's why it's so sort of empty. There's very little actually in this box anymore. But there you go. That's your mixed bits box, and it's very good for loot. This box, however, is solely dedicated to all things Imperial. There's a dread to loot, as well as a whole host of Space Marine war gear and armour, shoulder pads and all that sort of thing. And the Marines themselves, as I said before, you can use them for dead bodies and stuff like that, for your bases. I've got a few random bits and bobs of things I've collected out of box sets mostly.
Let's stop to consider some sources of loot. Now the first and most obvious choice would of course be Games Workshop. Now they're looted, well it's not actually looted, but it's going to be the Devastator squad and the Cadian heavy weapons team. They're both being used by myself in my looters, as you've just seen, and I've still got a lot of weapons left from them to use. So I would recommend them as a good place to start if you want to have some looted weapons. But as for looted vehicles, that's another matter. I would suggest though that you first of all check out Google, tap in Looted Wagon or Ork Looted Wagon, and have a look at the many inspirational pictures that are going to come up. There's so many good ones, there really are. But don't set your sights too high, don't be a mad mech straight away. You know, start perhaps with an Imperial Lehman Russ. That always looks good when it's converted over to Ork, so that's a good place to start. Another good place to start would be the Space Marine Rhino. Now the Space Marine Rhino actually has an accessory kit made for it by a third party company to convert it over to Orks. So if you check out the green one, there is actually a conversion kit for Rhinos, especially made there, that makes it into an Ork looted wagon. So you don't have to put all the effort into actually creating all those accessory extra bits and bobs yourself. So go and check that one out, guys, it's well worth a look. And speaking of third party companies, there are many who produce lots of weaponry and war gear for conversion purposes that are just perfect for us Ork hoarders. Cromlech, Spellcrow, Max Mini, Wargame Exclusive, Puppets War, and the before mentioned green one, or da green one. I will be releasing a video focusing on each of these in the near future, where I'll take a look at what they each have to offer us Ork collectors. Another source of loot that I've already utilised and mentioned in this video is that which comes from the good old trusty friend. Now if you're fortunate enough to have a friend, or even more fortunate enough to have a friend that plays 40k and might have an army that opposes your own, then you could ask them for a little bit of loot, because they're bound to have a few bits and bobs left over from their sprues too. So if you can get hold of a few weapons or a few even characters or troops or whatever, you can actually use those to adorn your own Ork models with armour and weaponry and a dead foe at their base, to really make it look like your Orks have faced this foe before, which really does look good. If this is a regular opponent of yours, it's really cool and fluffy to have your Orks with loot that they've acquired from facing this enemy before, I think. There are two other sources of loot worth a mention. There are obviously many others, but here's two others that I think are worth a quick mention, which are kids' toys, particularly those intended for boys, but kids' toys, and plastic waste. Now, in both examples, and particularly with plastic waste, which is usually free, it should usually be something you're getting a lot of anyway in your kitchen or your bathroom, or if you're being a good person, perhaps not so much, but here's a good way that you can reuse it. So many of these things will come with unusual shapes that you can use to make Ork weaponry and buildings and all sorts of things. So keep hold of any decent plastic shapes and things like that. Get a bag, chuck it up in the loft even, or a box in the garage. Just keep all your old bits of plastic, clean them up first of course, and stick them in a box there. But they're very useful. But also have a little rummage through the kids' toys if you've got kids of your own, or go to a very cheap shop and have a look down the kids' toys aisle, because sometimes you'll find perhaps like a zappy gun or something that has a noise generator in it, and it's got some nice ribbed shapes along it that you could perhaps use on a vehicle or on a weapon or something like that, like a big cannon or something like that. There's a lot of shapes that would be very difficult for you to create for yourself with plastic cards. So finding useful bits within kids' toys and within packaging that you can actually use to make shapes and stuff that look like they may have been looted from somewhere else. They don't necessarily have to have an orky look about them to start with. In fact, sometimes it's pretty cool if you pick up a kid's toy that's got a spaceshipy sort of theme. It doesn't necessarily have to look particularly orky, but once you go putting a few bits of Ork armour bolted to it, a few rivets and a few glyphs here and there and a few dags, all of a sudden it looks orky. So bear that in mind and keep hold of those little bits and bobs, and keep an eye out for them in the cheap shops and all of those sorts of places.